Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Sun Dragon Tips and Tricks. I'm Rebecca. I'm the owner of Sun Dragon Art and Fiber in downtown Brevard, North Carolina. And last week I showed you how to knit in a small circumference with 2 circular needles. And a while back I showed magic loop method. And I've been talking a lot about how there are 3 ways to do this. There are 3 ways to knit in a small circle if you don't have a small enough cable on your needle. And I keep jumping over the classic double point method. A needle with 2 ends on it, and also when you have a handful of needles involved, can be a little bit daunting, but not if you know how to approach it. So today's video is about the ever classic double point needle method for knitting in the round. I do still use this quite a bit, even though I like magic loop and I like 2 circulars. I find this can be, it's hard to say when this is more functional than the others. I more find that people like different methods. Different people will like different methods better. And this is the classic. A lot of socks, there's a lot of purists who make socks who say that you have to do them on double points. I am not going to weigh in on that fray to say yay or nay on that. I'm going to say you should do what you like. But let's show you how to use these. The biggest tip I'm going to give you is, even though we're going to have at least 4 needles involved, you're only using 2 at a time, which is very much like when you're just plain knitting. So let's dive in. Let's get to it. Knitting in the round on a small circumference. We are going to talk about the classic DPN or double point needle method today. If you'd like to see 2 other ways, I have videos on magic loop and 2 circulars as ways to use circular needles to do this, longer circular needles. But let's talk about the classics today. So, let's dive right into my tips. One of my biggest tips for knitting in the round in general is always knit forward. By that I mean we want to keep rotating it. We're going to keep rotating. Basically, if you were looking overhead, we are rotating in a counterclockwise motion. Or you can think about it rotating. You're going to keep moving the stitches towards the right. So we're going to keep rotating it to the right. That was my swivel chair. That direction. We need to keep moving the stitches this way. We're not going to flip around and go back when we're going in a circle. So always knit forward. Another tip I give people is you're only using 2 needles. So there are going to be a lot of needles holding things. We'll see that in a minute. So focus on 2 needles. 1 full needle. By full, I mean the one with the stitches. Only 1 full needle at a time, and you pair it with an empty needle. So it's just like knitting straight. Full needle, empty needle, knit across, rotate and find a new full needle, new empty needle, knit across. We'll show you what that means in just a minute. Treat your other needles with stitches. They become stitch holders. You try to ignore them as best you can. It's kind of hard because they're going to want to be up in your face. But as best you can, try to ignore them. Focus only on the 2 needles you're actually knitting with at any one time. Remember to rotate your needles. I mentioned that up above at the end of knitting every needle. The danger can be is you knit 1 needle and you keep going. You are always rotating your needles at the end of every needle. And you're rotating it to the right, as I mentioned above. Underline that. Boop. Without crossing it out, I hope. Hey. So you're rotating it. Your full needle is going to become your new empty needle. Your new, when you finish knitting the stitches off of it. You're going to keep rotating everything. Don't worry about if this doesn't make sense, just reading the words. That's why we're going to picture it out and we're going to do it. So everything keeps rotating. Every time you reach the end of a needle, you rotate. To start a project, when I get to the actual knitting with real materials, I will show you this. What I usually say, a lot of people use double points for the finish of a hat so they are not starting. If you're starting something small in the round on double points, I advise cast onto one needle, divide the total number of stitches by the number of needles they're going to go on, the holder needles, the number of needles you're going to be distributing them onto, and slip that new number onto each needle. So say I had 12 stitches and I have 3 holder needles, if I can spell. Each will get 4 stitches. It's 12 stitches, 3 needles. Each one needs 4 stitches before I start. And then I'm going to join to work in the round. I have a whole other video on doing that successfully. Let's move on to what this looks like in pictures. So, what I have going on here, I have 3 holder needles. And then this one is my empty needle. Let's color code these. So sometimes I number them, but they're going to shift, okay? We could talk about 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to leave the stitches uncolored and just use colors on my needles. So, why don't we, I always go to my trusty orange first. He's probably nice and dirty because he keeps hitting all my black here. But I've got an orange needle. I'll get a blue needle. I'll get a green needle. And I'm going to make my empty needle right here purple. Kind of hot magenta, right? All right, so one thing that I will say, that my 3 holder needles right now, orange, blue, and green. If you're ever in the middle of your work, how you can tell what is going on is where is your working yarn. My working yarn is attached to my green needle. So the working yarn will be attached to the last needle knit. The green one was the last one knit. That means my orange one is next. You want to keep going in a circle. So we want to move from this needle to the next one. The orange one is the one that needs to be knit next. That was our last stitch. This is our next stitch to keep going in a circle. Always knitting forward, never back on what you just did. Always forward. Away from the stitches you just did instead of back over them. So on this panel, the orange and the purple are the only needles I need to concern myself with. These two and back. These are holders. Those are stitch holders in the back. I'm just going to ignore them. I'm going to grab the orange needle with my left hand and the purple needle with my right hand, and I'm going to knit across those 3 stitches. Not going to draw that. I'd like to have you imagine that until we get to the real yarn. So left hand, right hand, knit across. Now when that happens, when I'm done with that, this is a picture of me having just knit across that. If you see, 1 row of knit stitches there, now there are 2. Now here's what it will look like if we color code this. The blue needle and the green needle they're still stitch holders. I try to keep them under everything else. They are still they haven't moved at all. What has moved, because we've knit across those stitches, is my purple needle is now holding stitches, the new stitches we just made. So the purple needle is in the mix now of the triangle. And the orange needle is now free. He is now free of stitches. He is not caught in the triangle anymore. And the working yarn is at the end of the purple needle. Now to keep going, we have to go from this stitch to that one to keep going in a circle. Remember up there, we were here, we came here and knit across. We need to keep going. So we need to rotate the entire piece. This triangle needs to rotate. And that's our next picture. Let's move him into the shot a little better. This is our next picture that's been rotated. See it, this yarn, which was up at the end of the needle there. See if I can bring it down just a hair. This yarn has moved over here. We have twisted the whole thing. So to color code that, our purple needle that was down at the bottom is now over to the right. It has moved over one. The green needle has moved from the right to the left. And the blue needle is now in front, ready to go. My advice as you rotate this, the needle that's going to be your next left-hand needle. So right now, my blue is going to end up in my left hand, right there. Whatever needle is going to be on top, I position it on top of the other holder needles. I shove them underneath so I can hold it better and not have these other needles in the back sticking up in my face. Everyone finds their own way to do that though. So the blue one is my new left-hand needle. What am I going to knit it with? I'm going to take the orange needle that just got freed up is now going to come over and be my new right-hand needle. So everything keeps rotating. Next, I will knit across these stitches with the orange one. The orange one will be there. I'll rotate again, and I will have the green one in my hand. The blue one will become empty, and I'll start knitting across again. Everything keeps swapping out. If that helped, awesome. If that was confusing, let's take a look at what it looks like with real needles and yarn. Before I do, let's do one more look at this. Needles this way, left hand, right hand, knit across. It'll look like this. New empty needle, rotate the whole thing so that the working yarn is over to the right, so we can knit across our next needle. Empty needle becomes the new right hand needle, knit across. Let's see it in real life, as we like to say. First things first, let's talk tools. When you first start knitting in the round, I'm a really big fan of wooden needles. They are less slippery than metal. I'm going to be doing things with a 10 3/4. It's an unusual size. That's why I'm doing it with those, so they're not missing from my shop. But they usually come in sets of 5. And the drawings I just showed you did not use this one. You can use 4 stitch holders, but I like to use 3 stitch holders and 1 empty. The way I look at it is then you have a replacement one if you lose one of these. Sometimes it makes more sense to divide the number of stitches up equally instead of by 3. Then you could have 4 stitch holders and a 5th. I like to keep it to as few a number of needles as possible. I'm going to use these for our sample, but I also wanted to show you these Prim ergonomics, which I think are very cool and great for beginners. They are longer than the wooden ones by about 1 inch. They keep your stitches on there pretty firmly without falling off because they're a little bit bigger on the ends. And they have these little bulbs. They call them hook tips. I thought that was the craziest thing when I first saw them. But they're so when you go in and you wrap around and you pull the yarn, or you pick, when you pull the yarn back under, the yarn gets caught right there, so it's less likely to fall off your needle. So there's many reasons these can be, as they roll away, can be really fun for your first projects. Or I have knitters who knit socks on these all the time, who are regular knitters. They're lightweight but longer. You gotta love that. So you can put more stitches, bigger stuff on them. They don't come in every size though. It's one of the holdups for me recommending them for every project. Okay, so as I just recommended on the whiteboard, I recommend casting all your stitches, if they will fit, onto one circular, which is going to roll away from me. I am going to do something that is, let's keep it the same as the drawing. The drawing only had 9 stitches. So let's cast on our 9. Okay, I've already got 1. Almost got caught on that last one a little bit. I got my 9. Long tail, not going to worry about it. Just try not to knit with your tail. So, following my very own method, I want to divide this by 3, so 3 stitches are going to go onto each needle. So I'm going to slide to the end, slip purlwise so they don't twist, which just means putting your needle in like you're going to do a purl stitch. 1, 2, 3. Got my 3. Wooden needles can be great because if your stitches are not super loose, I can just let that hang and it's not going to fall off. I'm going to come right in here. I'm going to ignore that as best I can and slip 1, 2, 3. Now I have 3 needles with 3 stitches on each needle. The same as joining in the round on a circular, I'm going to lay it out. This is the end of my cast on, so I need to knit into the butt end, the end with no yarn first. So this is my first needle to pick up. I'm going to slide the stitches to the end of it, pick up my yarn. I want to make sure the yarn's not wrapped over. It is just coming up from under and off. When I go to knit in the round, honestly, sometimes I put my needle in first and then grab my yarn and pull it up. Now here's the deal. These guys, if I'm not careful, will be all up in my face. I'm going to try to keep them, sometimes I try to keep them under the meaty part of my thumb. And I try to keep the 2 needles I'm knitting with on top. This first one's always super awkward. I'm going to knit 1 stitch and I'm going to pull it up close. This stitch holder up close so that there isn't a big gap there. That is what most people either fear or worry about, and I'm going to knit across, is that the gap between the needles, and he wants to go all over the place. Try to keep him underneath. The gap between the needles can lead to ladders. So I just finished knitting across, empty needle. This is the last stitch I did. This one here is my next one. So if you need to, put it down. Try not to have it roll away. I really need this so it doesn't roll away. Okay, put it down. Grab my new, twist it, rotate. Bring this guy up top. The next needle is my new left-hand needle. The empty one becomes my new right-hand needle. Put these under me if I can so that I can just knit across. Empty needle down if it helps. So I can grab my new, if I rotate, the next needle that's going to be my left-hand needle. Now be careful. Don't keep knitting with this one. Whenever you grab a new needle in your left hand, make sure you're also getting a new needle in your right hand so that you don't suddenly end up on 2 needles instead of 3 and go, uh-oh. The quick fix to that is just slip them back to a new needle, to a different needle. I'm going to, again, I'm making sure that this, what could happen is this is wound around. You really want to make sure your yarn from the needle you just did is just kind of loosely over the back of the needle. Not wound around anything. That can lead to added stitches. A yarn over on one of your holder needles. But what you can do, see this yarn is in the back here? If I leave it over the front, or if I leave it in back, when I put this down to grab my new needle and I get my new needle on top, before I start, I may want to make sure that that yarn is not wound around any needles. Grab my empty needle, come in and knit. Now I have a very small number of stitches here so I can show you this transition. You'll probably have more. This one, if anything, I want to let go of this needle. I'll grab my new needle for my left hand, let go, pick up my new empty needle, figure out where my yarn is, make sure it's not tangled, and keep going. I've got a couple rows of stitches there that will lead a little tube underneath. Thanks for joining us for the classic double point needle lesson. It's not awkward at all, is it, right? I was saying before that any method of knitting in the round on something smaller than a circular that actually fits it will be a little bit awkward. You decide which level of awkwardness is least for you, which one you're the most adept at. Try them all out. I have videos on all 3 of the methods I like to teach now. So, thanks for joining us. Thanks for being a part of the Sun Dragon community. If you haven't already, consider subscribing, hitting that bell. It'll tell you when I do a new video. Let me know if there's something you'd like a video on. I always say that if it's a really specific technique in a single pattern, that might be hard. But if it's something that is used widely that I can make a video on, I'm happy to do it. If it's something really specific to a pattern you're working on, we may want to schedule a lesson. A Zoom lesson or an in-person outside with masks on lesson at the shop. If you're watching this post-COVID, awesome. I'm looking forward to the day we don't have to wear masks. But until then, we will stay safe. Anyway, I've gone on long enough. You all enjoy your Monday. Hopefully this will be up Monday afternoon sometime. I think we just hit the noon hour. We love you and miss you all, especially the people we haven't even met yet. Thanks very much for being a part of our community, and may your crafting be filled with joy and confidence. Bye-bye.